My name is Hilda, and I am 54 years old. 3 weeks ago, I received what I thought was a wedding invitation in my mailbox. Instead, it was a $90,000 bill from my own daughter's wedding, a wedding I wasn't even invited to attend. The note attached simply read that I should feel lucky to contribute to such a beautiful day. 25 years of being a single mother, working 2 jobs, sacrificing everything for her future, and this is how she repays me. Before I tell you how this all started, let me know where you are watching from. Please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories. Trust me, you will not believe how this wedding drama unfolds. Looking back, I suppose I should have seen the warning signs earlier. But when you love someone as much as I loved my daughter Emma, you tend to overlook things that might seem obvious to others. I became a single mother when Emma was just 2 years old. Her father decided that family life was not for him and disappeared one morning, leaving nothing but a note on the kitchen counter and $23 in our shared checking account. Those early years were brutal. I worked as a bank teller during the day, handling other people's money while worrying about my own. Every evening, I would rush to pick up Emma from daycare, bring her home, feed her dinner, and then head out again to wait tables at Romano's Italian restaurant until midnight. The tips were decent, but never quite enough. I remember counting quarters at the kitchen table, after Emma went to bed, separating them into piles for rent, groceries, and daycare. But I was determined to give Emma everything she needed. When other kids had store-bought birthday cakes, I taught myself to bake elaborate creations in our tiny kitchen. I spent hours watching YouTube tutorials after my restaurant shifts, practicing with cheap ingredients until I could make something that looked professionally done. Emma's face would light up every birthday morning when she saw what I had created for her. Those moments made every sleepless night worth it. I saved every penny I could for Emma's college fund. While other single mothers my age were dating or going out with friends, I was working extra shifts and depositing $5 bills into a savings account. I bought my clothes from thrift stores and drove a 15-year-old Honda Civic with a rattling engine and a broken air conditioner. Emma never complained about our modest lifestyle. She understood that we were a team working together toward her future. Our evenings together were sacred. After homework was finished, we would cook dinner side by side in our small kitchen. Emma would tell me about her day at school while I stirred sauce or chopped vegetables. We developed our own traditions like Saturday movie nights with homemade popcorn and hot chocolate, and Sunday morning pancakes shaped like animals. Emma would giggle as I attempted to make pancake elephants and giraffes, usually ending up with something that looked more like abstract art. As Emma grew older, our bond only strengthened. She would call me from school when she had a bad day, and I would listen for hours to teenage drama that seemed earth-shattering to her. I helped her with college applications, driving to different campuses on weekends, so she could get a feel for each environment. When she got accepted to the University of Southern California with a partial scholarship, I cried tears of joy in the financial aid office. Emma thrived in college. She chose marketing as her major and threw herself into her studies with the same determination that I had shown in raising her. She called me every Sunday evening to tell me about her classes, her professors, and the internships she was pursuing. I lived vicariously through her experiences, feeling proud that all my sacrifices had led to this moment. She was becoming the educated, successful woman I had always dreamed she would be. When Emma graduated summa cum laude, I was sitting in the front row wearing the one good dress I owned, taking pictures with a disposable camera because I could not afford a digital one. She found me in the crowd afterward and threw her arms around me, whispering, "Thank you for everything, Mum. I could not have done this without you." That hug felt like validation for every difficult choice I had made over the previous 22 years. Emma landed her first job at a prestigious advertising agency in downtown Los Angeles. She was making more money in her starting salary than I had ever earned in a single year. She moved into a small apartment in West Hollywood and began building the life I had always wanted for her. Our weekly phone calls continued, and she would describe her work projects with enthusiasm that reminded me of the little girl who used to tell me about her school day over dinner. Then Emma met Harrison, and everything began to change. She mentioned him casually at first during one of our Sunday calls. He worked at an investment firm and came from what she described as old money. I was excited for her. She deserved to find love and happiness after working so hard to establish her career. When she asked if she could bring him to meet me, I spent an entire week cleaning our small house and planning the perfect dinner. The first meeting took place at an upscale restaurant that Harrison had chosen. I felt underdressed in my best blouse and slacks, but Emma seemed nervous and excited to introduce us. Harrison was handsome and well-dressed with perfectly styled hair and an expensive watch that caught the light every time he moved his hand. He was polite during our conversation, asking appropriate questions about my work and interests, but there was something cold in his eyes when he looked at me. I told him stories about Emma as a child, hoping to share some of the joy and pride I felt as her mother. I talked about her first day of school, her science fair projects, and the time she organized a neighborhood lemonade stand to raise money for a local animal shelter. Harrison listened with what appeared to be interest, but I noticed he kept glancing around the restaurant and checking his phone. Emma seemed to be watching his reactions carefully, as if she was seeking his approval for everything I said. As the evening progressed, I began to notice subtle changes in Emma's behavior. She corrected my grammar twice during the conversation, something she had never done before. When I mentioned my work at the restaurant, she quickly changed the subject. When Harrison asked about our family background, Emma gave vague answers that made it sound like our life had been much more comfortable than it actually was. I felt confused and slightly hurt, but I tried to convince myself that she was just nervous about introducing her new boyfriend to her mother. Over the following months, I began to notice more changes in Emma's behavior that made me uncomfortable. Our weekly phone calls became bi-weekly, then monthly. When I did manage to reach her, she seemed distracted and eager to end the conversation quickly. She would interrupt me mid-sentence to tell me she needed to go meet Harrison or attend some social event I had never heard of. Emma's vocabulary began to change during our conversations. She started using words like lifestyle and networking and social circles. She talked about restaurants I had never heard of and events that cost more money than I made in a month. When I asked questions about these new experiences, she would explain them in a way that made me feel ignorant and out of touch. The most painful change was in her attitude toward our shared memories. When I mentioned the birthday cakes I used to make for her, she laughed and said she was embarrassed by how homemade everything looked in our old photos. When I brought up our Saturday movie nights, she said she wished we had been able to afford to go to actual theaters like normal families. These comments felt like physical blows because they dismissed years of love and effort that I had poured into making our life together special, despite our financial limitations. Emma's physical appearance also began to change during this period. Her clothes became more expensive and sophisticated. Her hair was professionally styled instead of the simple ponytail she had worn throughout college. She carried designer handbags and wore jewelry that I knew cost more than my monthly salary. When I complimented her new look during one of our increasingly rare visits, she said Harrison had been helping her develop better taste. The most disturbing change came during a visit to my house about 6 months after I first met Harrison. Emma and Harrison arrived on a Saturday afternoon, and I had spent the entire morning cleaning and preparing Emma's favorite meal. I was excited to have them both in my home, where I could show Harrison the environment where Emma had grown up. From the moment they walked through the front door, I could see Harrison taking inventory of everything around him. His eyes moved from our worn furniture to the family photos on the mantel to the small television in the living room. He made polite comments about how cozy everything looked, but his tone suggested that cozy was not a compliment. Emma seemed to be seeing our house through his eyes for the first time, and she appeared embarrassed by details she had never noticed before. During dinner, I served the homemade lasagna that had been Emma's favorite dish since childhood. I had spent hours preparing it, layering the pasta and cheese and meat sauce with the same care I had always taken with her meals. Harrison took one bite, chewed slowly, and then pushed his food around his plate without eating any more. When I asked if something was wrong with the meal, he assured me it was very interesting and that he was just not very hungry. Emma, who normally would have asked for seconds and complimented my cooking, ate only a few bites and kept apologizing to Harrison for the simple presentation. She explained that I was not used to cooking for guests and that we usually ate more casual meals. I felt humiliated and confused. The same lasagna recipe had been a symbol of love and comfort in our family for years, and now it was being treated as an embarrassment. The conversation during dinner was even more painful than the rejected food. Harrison talked extensively about his family's background, mentioning his father's work on Wall Street and his mother's interior design business. He described their house in Connecticut and their summer home in the Hamptons. He asked pointed questions about my education and career history, and I could feel him judging every answer I gave. Emma sat quietly during most of this conversation, occasionally jumping in to steer the topic away from our modest background. When Harrison asked about Emma's father, she gave a brief explanation that made it sound like he had simply moved away rather than abandoned us. When he asked about my career goals, Emma answered for me, suggesting that I was perfectly happy with my current situation and did not have ambitions beyond my existing work. When they left that evening, Emma gave me a hug that felt mechanical and obligatory. She promised to call me soon, but her voice lacked the warmth that had always characterized our goodbyes. Harrison shook my hand and thanked me for the lovely evening, but his words felt rehearsed and empty. As I watched them drive away in Harrison's expensive car, I had a sinking feeling that I was losing my daughter to a world that had no place for someone like me. The distance between Emma and me continued to grow over the following year. Our phone conversations became increasingly superficial and infrequent. Emma would call me every few weeks, usually when she was walking between appointments or riding in an Uber. She would ask quick questions about my health and work, but she no longer wanted to hear the details of my daily life that had once interested her. Emma began to correct my speech during our conversations in a way that felt condescending and hurtful. When I used expressions that had been common in our family for years, she would say things like, "Mum, you do not say it like that," or "That is not how people talk." She seemed to be training me to communicate in a way that would be acceptable to Harrison's social circle, even though I was never included in that world. The most painful moment came when I missed Mother's Day. Emma had always made a big celebration out of Mother's Day, bringing me flowers and taking me to brunch at a local restaurant. This year, she sent me a text message that simply said, "Happy Mother's Day," with a generic flower emoji. When I called to thank her and ask about getting together, she told me she was spending the day with Harrison's family at their country club. She said she had assumed I would understand that she needed to prioritize her relationship. I spent that Mother's Day alone in my house, looking through photo albums of Emma's childhood and wondering where I had gone wrong. The little girl who used to make me construction paper cards and breakfast in bed had become a stranger who could not spare an hour to see her mother on the holiday dedicated to celebrating our relationship. Emma's social media presence also changed during this period, and it provided painful glimpses into her new life. Her Facebook and Instagram accounts were filled with pictures of elegant dinners, charity events, and weekend trips to expensive destinations. She was always perfectly dressed and surrounded by well-dressed people I had never met. Harrison appeared in most of the photos, usually with his arm around her and a possessive smile on his face. What hurt most about these social media posts was not the luxury they displayed, but the complete absence of any reference to her past life. There were no photos of us together, no mentions of her childhood, no acknowledgement of the sacrifices we had both made to get her to this point. It was as if she had decided that her life began when she met Harrison, and everything that came before was embarrassing history to be erased. The final blow came when I learned about Emma's engagement through a text message. I was at work helping customers at the bank when my phone buzzed with a message that said, "Harrison proposed we are engaged." There was no phone call, no invitation to celebrate, no sharing of the romantic details that I had always imagined would be part of this moment in my daughter's life. I immediately called Emma back, hoping to hear her voice and share in her excitement. The phone rang several times before she answered, and when she did, she sounded rushed and distracted. I could hear voices and laughter in the background, and she explained that she was at a celebration dinner with Harrison's family. When I asked about the proposal and the ring and their plans, she said, "I will call you back later," and hung up before I could say anything else. She never called back that day, or the next day, or the day after that. When I finally reached her a week later, she seemed annoyed that I was asking for details about the engagement. She said the proposal had been beautiful and romantic, but she did not want to go through the whole story again because she had already told it so many times to Harrison's family and friends. I saw photos of the engagement ring on Facebook before Emma ever showed it to me in person. It was a massive diamond that probably cost more than I made in several years. The comments under the photo were all from Harrison's friends and family members, congratulating them and making references to country clubs and wedding venues I had never heard of. Reading these comments, I realized that Emma's entire social circle had changed, and I was not part of her new world. The few times I saw Emma in person during this engagement period, she seemed like a completely different person. She moved differently, spoke differently, and even laughed differently. The spontaneous, genuine girl I had raised had been replaced by someone who seemed to be constantly performing for an invisible audience. Every gesture and word appeared calculated to maintain an image that would be acceptable to Harrison's social expectations. Emma came to my house one afternoon with a stack of bridal magazines and a laptop computer. She spread everything out on my kitchen table and began showing me photos of wedding venues, flower arrangements, and dress designs. Everything was elaborate and expensive, far beyond anything I had ever imagined for a wedding. When I asked about the budget for these plans, Emma waved her hand dismissively and said I should not worry about money because this was her dream wedding. As she scrolled through photos of country clubs and luxury hotels, Emma mentioned casually that Harrison's mother was helping with the planning. She said Mrs. Montgomery had connections with all the best vendors and knew exactly what would be appropriate for a wedding of this caliber. Emma spoke about Mrs. Montgomery with a respect and deference that she had once reserved for me, and I felt like I was being replaced as the most important woman in her life. During this planning session, Emma never asked for my opinion about any aspect of the wedding. She showed me photos and described her preferences, but she did not seem interested in my thoughts or suggestions. When I tried to offer ideas based on my own dreams for her wedding day, she would politely dismiss them as not fitting with the overall vision she and Harrison had developed. When Emma left that day, I realized that I had not been consulted about the wedding planning at all. I had been informed about decisions that had already been made by other people. The wedding was clearly being designed for Harrison's family and social circle, and I was expected to be a grateful observer rather than a participating mother of the bride. As Emma's wedding day approached, I began to notice that I had not received any of the traditional invitations or information that the mother of the bride would normally receive. I had not gotten a save the date card, and when I asked Emma about it, she told me they were doing digital invitations and that I would receive mine soon. Weeks passed, and I never received any kind of formal invitation. I checked my email constantly, hoping to find the wedding details that would allow me to plan for what should have been one of the most important days of my life. When I asked Emma about the timeline, she gave vague answers about the date and location, always saying she would send me the information later. I began to feel increasingly anxious about my role in the wedding. I did not know what I was supposed to wear when I was supposed to arrive, or what my responsibilities would be as the mother of the bride. When I tried to ask Emma these questions, she seemed irritated by my need for details and told me not to worry about anything, because everything was being handled. The most painful discovery came through social media, which had become my only window into Emma's life. I was scrolling through Facebook one evening when I saw photos posted by Harrison's mother from what was clearly Emma's bridal shower. Emma looked radiant in an expensive dress, surrounded by women in designer outfits, holding champagne glasses and laughing at some shared joke. I stared at those photos for hours, examining every detail and trying to understand how my daughter could have had a bridal shower without inviting me. All the women in the pictures were strangers to me, presumably Harrison's female relatives and family friends. There was no sign of any of Emma's childhood friends or anyone from our side of the family. It was as if Emma's entire history had been erased and replaced with Harrison's world. The comments under the photos made my exclusion even more obvious. Harrison's mother had written, "Such an elegant affair. Emma fits right in with our family." And other women had responded with inside jokes and references to people and events I knew nothing about. Reading these comments, I realized that Emma had not just failed to invite me to her bridal shower. She had created an entirely new identity that had no connection to the life we had shared. I could not sleep that night. I kept thinking about all the times I had imagined Emma's wedding day and my role as her mother. I had pictured myself helping her get dressed, holding her bouquet during the ceremony, and dancing with her at the reception. I had saved money over the years, specifically for this moment, planning to contribute to her wedding expenses as a final gift from a mother to her daughter. The next morning, I called Emma and demanded an explanation. I asked her directly about the bridal shower and why I had not been invited. Emma's response was defensive and evasive. She said the shower had been small and intimate, organized by Harrison's mother for just a few close family members. When I pointed out that I was her family, she said the situation was complicated because Harrison's family had different traditions and expectations. Emma then said something that completely broke my heart. She told me that Harrison's family was paying for the wedding, which meant they got to make decisions about the guest list and the celebrations. She said that maybe it was better this way, because I would not feel comfortable around all the fancy people who would be attending. She suggested that the formal protocol and social expectations would be overwhelming for someone with my background. I asked her directly if I was invited to the wedding itself. Emma hesitated for a long moment before saying that the wedding was going to be very small and exclusive, limited to immediate family and close friends. She said that Harrison's family had strong feelings about maintaining a certain atmosphere, and that adding too many people would change the dynamic they were trying to create. When I pressed her for a clear answer, Emma finally said that maybe it would be better for everyone if I did not attend the wedding. She said I would feel out of place among all the wealthy guests, and that my presence might create awkward situation that would be stressful for her on her special day. She suggested that we could have our own private celebration later, just the two of us, where I would be more comfortable. Emma hung up the phone before I could respond, leaving me staring at the silent receiver in disbelief. My own daughter had just told me that I was not welcome at her wedding because I was not good enough for her new family. After 25 years of sacrificing everything for her happiness and success, I was being excluded from the most important day of her life because I was an embarrassment. That night I cried harder than I had since Emma's father left us. I felt like I was losing my daughter all over again. But this time, it was her choice to abandon me. The little girl I had raised to be strong and independent had become someone who was ashamed of her own mother. All my dreams of sharing her wedding day had been shattered by her need to fit into a world that had no place for people like me. 3 weeks after Emma's wedding, which took place without me on a beautiful Saturday in June, I received a large envelope in my mailbox. I thought it might contain wedding photos that Emma had finally decided to share with me, and I opened it eagerly, hoping to see pictures of my daughter on her special day. Instead, I found a detailed itemized bill for $90,000. The pages listed every expense from the wedding reception, from the $25,000 venue rental to the $18,000 catering bill to the $8,500 floral arrangements. Every single item was more expensive than anything I had ever purchased in my entire life. Attached to the bill was a handwritten note from Emma. I recognized her careful handwriting, the same script she had used for school projects and thank you cards throughout her childhood. The note read, "Mum, I know this looks like a lot, but you should feel lucky to contribute to such a beautiful day. Harrison's family covered the initial costs, but we thought you would want to reimburse them. This is what mothers do for their daughters." I read that note over and over, trying to understand how the child I had raised could have written those words. The phrase, "you should feel lucky," echoed in my mind like a cruel joke. Lucky to pay for a wedding I was not allowed to attend. Lucky to reimburse strangers who had replaced me in my daughter's life. Lucky to be treated like a financial resource rather than a loving mother. The bill itself was a detailed breakdown of luxury beyond anything I had ever experienced. There were charges for premium champagne that cost more per bottle than I spent on groceries in a month. The floral arrangements had cost more than my annual mortgage payments. The designer wedding cake had a price tag that exceeded my car's current value. Attached to the financial documents were professional wedding photos that showed Emma looking absolutely stunning in a designer gown that probably cost more than my annual salary. She was surrounded by Harrison's large, well-dressed family, all of them smiling and celebrating in an elegant country club setting. Harrison looked handsome and confident, clearly comfortable in this world of wealth and privilege that had become Emma's new reality. I studied those photos carefully, looking for any sign of the daughter I had raised. Emma's smile looked perfect and radiant, but there was something in her eyes that seemed different. The genuine joy and warmth that had always characterized her expressions had been replaced by something more controlled and artificial. She looked like she was playing a role, rather than celebrating the happiest day of her life. The most painful part of looking at those photos was seeing how complete Emma's new family appeared without me. Harrison's parents stood proudly beside the couple, clearly fulfilling the traditional roles of wedding hosts and family leaders. Harrison's siblings and their children filled the group photos, creating the image of a large, successful family celebration. There was no empty space where I should have been standing, no sign that anyone was missing from this perfect picture. I sat at my kitchen table for hours, holding those photos and trying to process what had happened to my relationship with Emma. The same table where we had done homework together, where I had helped her with college applications, where we had planned her future dreams, had become the place where I discovered how completely she had erased me from her life. The financial reality of the situation was overwhelming. $90,000 represented approximately 4 years of my salary at the bank. It was more than my entire retirement savings, more than the equity I had built in my small house, more than any amount of money I could reasonably access without destroying my financial security. But the emotional impact was even more devastating than the financial shock. Emma had not just asked me to pay for her wedding, she had demanded that I be grateful for the privilege of funding a celebration that had excluded me. She had treated my potential contribution as an obligation rather than a gift, and she had framed my financial support as something I owed her rather than something she should appreciate. As I sat there, surrounded by wedding photos and financial documents, I felt a strange sense of clarity beginning to emerge from my shock and pain. Emma had clearly learned to navigate Harrison's world successfully, but she had forgotten the values I had tried to teach her about respect, gratitude, and family loyalty. If she wanted to play games with money and social status, I was going to show her that I had learned a few things about strategy during my years of financial struggle. I realized that this moment was not just about a wedding bill or hurt feelings. It was about whether I was going to allow my daughter to treat me as a convenient source of funding for her new lifestyle, or whether I was going to demand the respect and consideration that any parent deserves from their child. Emma needed to learn that actions have consequences and that treating people badly does not become acceptable just because you surround yourself with wealth and privilege. For the first time since receiving that devastating bill, I smiled. Emma thought she had learned how to manipulate people by observing Harrison's family, but she had underestimated the strength and determination of the woman who had raised her. I was going to teach my daughter a lesson about values that she would never forget. I spent the entire weekend after receiving Emma's bill doing research and planning my response. I was not going to react emotionally or make decisions based on hurt feelings. Instead, I was going to approach this situation with the same careful strategy I had used to survive as a single mother and build a better life for Emma. My first step was to verify the costs listed on Emma's bill. I called several wedding venues in the area and asked about their pricing for events similar to what was described in the documents Emma had sent me. I called caterers and florists and photographers, pretending to be planning my own event and asking for detailed price quotes. What I discovered was shocking but not surprising. Emma and Harrison had inflated the actual wedding costs by approximately 40%. The venue that supposedly cost $25,000 actually charged $18,000 for similar events. The catering bill had been padded by about 30%, and the floral arrangements had been marked up even more dramatically. My daughter was not just asking me to pay for her wedding, she was asking me to pay significantly more than the wedding had actually cost. She and Harrison were planning to profit from my contribution, probably using the extra money to fund their honeymoon, or to reimburse Harrison's family for other expenses they had covered. I also spent time researching Harrison's family background and financial situation. Through public records and social media investigation, I learned that his father's investment firm had been very successful, and that the family owned multiple properties and maintained a lifestyle that made my contribution financially unnecessary. They were asking me to pay, not because they needed the money, but because they wanted to establish my role as a subordinate family member who could be called upon to provide financial support when needed. The more I learned about the manipulation behind Emma's request, the angrier I became. But I channeled that anger into developing a comprehensive response that would address both the immediate situation and the broader problems in my relationship with Emma. My plan involved several components, each designed to achieve a specific goal. I wanted to expose the financial manipulation, demonstrate the impact of Emma's choices on my life, and create consequences that would force her to confront the reality of what she had become. I began by writing a detailed letter to Emma that laid out the complete financial reality of her request. I included copies of my bank statements showing my actual income and savings. I provided documentation of my monthly expenses, including my mortgage payment utilities, groceries, and the small amount I managed to save each month for retirement. The letter explained exactly what $90,000 represented in terms of my life and financial security. I calculated that this amount equaled 4 years and 2 months of my net income after taxes. I showed her that paying this bill would require me to cash out my entire retirement fund and take a second mortgage on my house, leaving me financially vulnerable for the rest of my life. I included photographs that Emma had probably forgotten existed. Pictures of me in my old work uniforms from the restaurant time cards, showing the double shifts I had worked to pay for her college expenses, and receipts from the thrift stores where I had bought my clothes, so that I could afford to buy her new school supplies and sports equipment. The letter also included a detailed breakdown of everything I had sacrificed over the years to ensure Emma's success. I calculated the total amount I had spent on her education, including not just tuition and books, but also the income I had lost by working fewer hours, so I could attend her school events and help her with homework. But the most important part of my letter was the loan agreement I had prepared. I wrote that if Emma truly needed $90,000, I would consider providing it as a loan with clearly defined terms. The agreement specified an interest rate comparable to what banks charged for personal loans, and it outlined a repayment schedule that would take approximately 20 years to complete. The loan document also included penalties for missed payments, and a clause that made the loan immediately due in full if Emma tried to default on her obligations. I wanted her to understand that if she was going to treat me like a bank rather than like her mother, I would respond with the same business-like approach that any financial institution would use. My second strategy involved social media, the same platform that had been used to exclude me from Emma's wedding celebrations. I created a detailed Facebook post that told the complete story of what had happened, including photos of the wedding bill alongside pictures from Emma's childhood that showed the modest circumstances in which I had raised her. I wrote about working 2 jobs to pay for Emma's education, about the years I had gone without new clothes or vacations, so that she could have opportunities I had never had. I included photos of myself in my old work uniforms, and I described the specific sacrifices I had made to ensure that Emma could attend college debt-free. The post concluded with copies of the wedding bill and Emma's note, along with my honest reaction to receiving a $90,000 invoice for a wedding I had not been invited to attend. I explained that I was sharing this story because I wanted people to understand what can happen when children lose sight of the values their parents tried to teach them. The response to my Facebook post was immediate and overwhelming. Friends from my neighborhood, former co-workers, and people who had known Emma during her childhood began commenting and sharing the post. Many of them expressed shock and disappointment at Emma's behavior, and several people mentioned that they had wondered why I had not been at the wedding. Most importantly, Emma's college friends and former co-workers began responding to the post. These were people who had known Emma before she met Harrison, and they remembered the warm, grateful young woman who used to talk proudly about her mother's sacrifices. Their comments expressed disbelief that Emma could have treated me so badly, and many of them said they were reaching out to her directly to express their disappointment. The consequences of my strategic response began almost immediately. On Monday morning, 2 days after I posted my story on social media, Emma called me crying. She had been receiving phone calls and text messages from friends and former colleagues who had seen my Facebook post and wanted to know if the story was true. Emma was particularly upset because Harrison's parents had also become aware of the situation through their own social media networks. Apparently, several people in their social circle had seen my post or heard about it from others, and questions were being raised about the family's treatment of the bride's mother. Harrison's mother had called Emma on Sunday evening, demanding an explanation for why the story was spreading on social media. Mrs. Montgomery was concerned about how the situation reflected on their family's reputation, and she wanted Emma to make the problem disappear immediately. The idea that they might be perceived as taking advantage of a working-class single mother was apparently very damaging to their carefully cultivated image. Emma begged me to take down my Facebook post, saying that it was ruining her relationship with Harrison's family and causing problems in her marriage. She said that people were contacting Harrison at work, asking uncomfortable questions, and that his parents were threatening to distance themselves from the couple if the social media attention continued. But the most significant response came from Emma's college friends and former co-workers, people who had known her before she transformed herself for Harrison's world. These individuals began reaching out to Emma, directly expressing their disappointment and disbelief at her behavior. Many of them reminded her of conversations they had had about her mother's sacrifices and how grateful she used to be for everything I had done. One of Emma's former roommates posted a public comment on my Facebook story, describing how Emma used to talk about me constantly during college. She mentioned specific stories Emma had told about my working 2 jobs and saving money for her education, and she expressed shock that the same person could now be demanding that I pay for a wedding I was not allowed to attend. Another former colleague shared a story about how Emma had once brought me to a company picnic and introduced me to everyone as the strongest woman I know. This woman wrote about how proud Emma had seemed of our close relationship and how she had talked about her plans to take care of me when she became successful. These public reminders of who Emma used to be seemed to have more impact on her than my letter or my demands for financial accountability. She was being forced to confront the difference between the person she had been and the person she had become, and the contrast was apparently difficult for her to accept. Emma called me again on Tuesday evening this time, without the tears and demands that I solve her social media problems. Her voice was quieter and more thoughtful, and she asked if we could meet in person to talk about what had happened. She said she wanted to understand how our relationship had deteriorated to this point, and she admitted that she had not realized how her behavior appeared from my perspective. I agreed to meet with Emma, but I made it clear that I expected a real conversation about the choices she had made, not just an attempt to smooth things over so that her problems with Harrison's family would go away. I told her that if she wanted to repair our relationship, she needed to be honest about how she had allowed Harrison's influence to change her values and priorities. When Emma arrived at my house the following Saturday, she came alone. Harrison was waiting in the car outside, but he did not come to the door or attempt to participate in our conversation. Emma looked tired and stressed, and for the first time in months, she reminded me of the daughter I had raised rather than the stranger she had become. We sat at my kitchen table, the same place where we had shared thousands of meals and conversations throughout her childhood. Emma began by apologizing for the way she had handled the wedding situation, but I stopped her and said that I needed her to understand the deeper problems before we could discuss specific incidents. I explained to Emma that the wedding bill was not really about money, although the financial manipulation was certainly hurtful. The real issue was that she had systematically excluded me from her life and then expected me to be grateful for the opportunity to fund the lifestyle that had replaced our relationship. I told Emma about the pain I had felt, watching her transform herself into someone who was ashamed of her background and her family. I described how it felt to see her embrace values that prioritized money and social status over loyalty and gratitude. I explained that her behavior had made me feel like my 25 years of sacrifices had been worthless, because they had not produced the kind of success that Harrison's family would respect. Emma listened to everything I said without interrupting, and I could see that she was finally beginning to understand how her choices had affected our relationship. When I finished talking, she sat quietly for several minutes before responding. Emma told me that she had not realized how much she had changed since meeting Harrison. She said that his world had made her feel like everything about her previous life was inadequate, and that she had tried to reinvent herself to fit into his family's expectations. She admitted that she had been embarrassed by our modest background, and had convinced herself that distancing herself from me was necessary for her success. Most importantly, Emma acknowledged that she had lost sight of the values I had taught her about respect, gratitude, and family loyalty. She said that Harrison's influence had made her believe that financial success was more important than maintaining relationships with people who had supported her before she became wealthy. Emma also admitted that the wedding bill had been Harrison's idea, and that he had convinced her that asking me to pay was a normal expectation for families like ours. She said he had told her that working-class parents were supposed to contribute financially to their children's weddings, even if they were not involved in the planning or the celebration. The most difficult part of our conversation came when Emma told me that she was beginning to question her relationship with Harrison and his family. She said that their reaction to my Facebook post had shown her how quickly they would abandon her if she became a source of embarrassment or social problems. She was starting to realize that their acceptance of her was conditional on her ability to maintain their standards and protect their reputation. The conversation with Emma marked the beginning of a slow and difficult process of rebuilding our relationship. She did not immediately leave Harrison or make dramatic changes in her life, but she began to recognize the ways that his influence had changed her priorities and values. Emma's first step was to withdraw the wedding bill entirely. She called Harrison's parents and told them that she would not be asking me to reimburse them for wedding expenses, and that she took full responsibility for any financial obligations related to the celebration. This decision created tension in her marriage because Harrison had been counting on my contribution to fund their honeymoon and other post-wedding expenses. Over the following months, Emma began to reconnect with friends from her college and early career days, people who had known her before she met Harrison. These relationships reminded her of who she used to be and helped her recognize how much she had changed. Several of these friends expressed concern about Harrison's controlling behavior and encouraged Emma to consider whether he was truly the right partner for her. The most significant change came when Emma started visiting me regularly again, usually without Harrison. We began having the kind of conversations we had shared before she became engaged, talking about her work, her dreams, and her concerns about her future. During these visits, I could see glimpses of the daughter I had raised, the thoughtful and caring person who had been buried under Harrison's expectations. Emma also began to notice things about Harrison that she had previously ignored or rationalized. She realized that he was embarrassed by her background, and that he expected her to distance herself from anyone who might remind his family of her humble origins. She saw that his love was conditional on her ability to transform herself into someone who met his standards, and that he had never accepted or appreciated the person she actually was. The final break came when Harrison's family demanded that Emma cut off contact with me entirely following my social media post. They said that my presence in her life was a liability that could continue to cause problems for their reputation, and they wanted her to choose between maintaining a relationship with me and remaining part of their family. Emma realized that this ultimatum revealed the true nature of Harrison's family and their values. They were willing to destroy her relationship with her mother to protect themselves from minor social embarrassment, and they expected her to be grateful for the privilege of making this sacrifice. Emma made her choice. She told Harrison that she would not abandon the woman who had raised her and supported her throughout her life. When Harrison and his family refused to accept this decision, Emma began the process of ending her marriage and extracting herself from their world. The divorce was difficult and expensive, but Emma was determined to reclaim her independence and her values. She moved out of the house she had shared with Harrison and found a smaller apartment that she could afford on her own salary. She gave back the expensive jewelry and designer clothes that had been gifts from Harrison's family, and she began rebuilding a life that was based on her own choices rather than someone else's expectations. Emma and I spent a lot of time talking during this period, working through the hurt and misunderstanding that had damaged our relationship. She apologized repeatedly for the way she had treated me, and she worked hard to demonstrate that she had remembered the values I had tried to teach her about loyalty, respect, and gratitude. The healing process was not always easy. There were moments when I struggled to forgive the pain Emma had caused, and there were times when she felt overwhelmed by the process of rebuilding her life. But we were both committed to repairing our relationship and learning from the mistakes that had nearly destroyed our bond. Emma also made amends in practical ways. She used her savings to pay for a vacation for both of us, a trip to a place I had always wanted to visit but could never afford. She insisted on paying for dinners when we went out together, and she made sure to include me in her social activities and introduce me proudly to her friends. Most importantly, Emma began to appreciate again the sacrifices I had made for her success. She would often mention specific things I had done for her during her childhood, thanking me for lessons she had learned or opportunities I had provided. She recognized that my love and support had been the foundation for everything she had achieved, and she was determined never to take that foundation for granted again. As I look back on this entire experience, I realized that the $90,000 wedding bill was actually one of the best things that ever happened to our relationship. It forced both Emma and me to confront problems that had been growing for years, and it created an opportunity for us to rebuild our bond on a stronger foundation. Emma learned that changing yourself to please other people is a form of self-betrayal that ultimately leads to unhappiness and isolation. She discovered that real love requires acceptance of who you actually are, not just who you might become if you transform yourself completely. Most importantly, she remembered that the people who love you through difficult times are the ones who deserve your loyalty and gratitude. I learned that sometimes the people we love most need to experience consequences before they can recognize the impact of their choices. I discovered that standing up for yourself and demanding respect is not selfish or vindictive, but necessary for maintaining healthy relationships. I also learned that forgiveness does not mean accepting unacceptable behavior, but rather working together to create better patterns for the future. The relationship Emma and I have today is stronger than it was before this crisis, because it is based on mutual respect and honest communication. Emma knows that I will support her through any difficulty, but she also knows that I expect her to treat me with the consideration that any parent deserves from their child. We often laugh now about the absurdity of that wedding bill and the drama it created. Emma jokes that $90,000 was a small price to pay for learning such an important lesson about values and priorities. I tell her that I am glad I never had to pay the bill, but that I would have found a way to do it if it had really been necessary for her happiness. Looking back, that $90,000 bill cost us nothing financially, but it saved everything that really mattered in our relationship. Sometimes the most expensive lessons are the ones that teach us what we cannot afford to lose. Have you ever had a family member try to take advantage of your generosity or love? How do you think you would have handled Emma's wedding bill situation? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life stories about family relationships and the lessons we learn when we stand up for ourselves. Share this with anyone who might be dealing with similar family dynamics. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it reminds you that sometimes the people we love need to learn hard lessons about respect and gratitude. Remember that your worth is not determined by others' opinions, and never let anyone make you feel ashamed of the sacrifices you have made for the people you love.